most evidence-based research practice that we've been able to find so far. And so I'm going to walk you through some of that data, some of that research, and talk you through some of the teachers that have already implemented it and the feedback they've given us in implementing it, as well as I have another PowerPoint from a teacher who created a PowerPoint for her students in that the actual teaching them the procedure and the implementation of it. And hopefully through all of that, we'll also, by the end of today, you'll be able to walk out with your groups, your dyad pairs already made. So on Monday, you can just hit the ground running. So that's hopefully what we get to do today. So a couple of great resources. These tiny URLs here at the bottom, tinyurl.com/Utah Dyad is a Google folder that I've created that has this PowerPoint, the PowerPoint of the teacher that she used with her students. It has the actual research article from Davis County that I'm going to reference today. It has bookmarks that you can use with your students that has the dyad rules on it. It has handouts and a few other things. As we find more dyad things, I throw them in there. And then the bottom one is the tinyurl.com/dyad families. That is a Google folder that I created in conjunction with United Way that is geared towards families. So PTA, parents, there's building reader toolkit guides that are built, that are created specifically for parents and teaching them about dyad. And so both of those are great resources as you're thinking about implementing this and sharing it with others. So this is kind of what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what it is, how to do it. I'm going to give you a chance to practice it for just a couple of minutes because at first it does feel a little awkward. And so it's good to just kind of feel what that feels like. So then as you're modeling and teaching the procedure to your students, you can anticipate that. And then planning on using it into your classroom. So again, because you have your beginning of the year Acadia's reading data already, you can create your groups today. So in the study that was done in Davis County a couple of years ago, they used Acadia's reading data as well as Scholastic Reading Inventory. And so this is a graph showing the Scholastic Reading Inventory for that group. How many of you, that looks pretty typical of maybe your beginning of the year class for you, or a class that you've had? It's pretty typical of the state. Only 1 out of every 2 third graders in the state is reading on grade level right now, which is a really scary statistic. This is what their data looked like at the end of the year. How many of you would be excited if that's what your class looked like from beginning to end? We'd be really excited if that's what the state looked like too. So when we're going through this data, it really dyad works, and what's really exciting is it works for everyone. So one of the things that is really important about dyad reading is it's saying the words out loud. So if you're thinking about, oh, this is one more thing, if you're doing what we lovingly call simultaneous staring in your classroom, this is a great thing to implement instead. So this act of reading out loud is what helps move students to that higher growth than just silently saying staring, or if they're high enough they actually can read, silently reading out loud, or silently reading. But too far. So I'm going to show you a video that's like 16 seconds long, and I want you to just think about what the students are doing, and then you're going to have a chance to talk to each other about what you see. So go ahead and turn to those around you. What did you notice in that video? about 30 more seconds, then we'll come back together. Come back with me in 5, 3, 1. Thank you. So what were some things that you noticed in that video of those two girls reading?
Out loud.
They're reading out loud.
Loud.
Yep.
One's pointing to the words.
Okay, so we're tracking the words.
Rhythmic.
Yeah, so rhythmic, so they weren't too fast, too slow.
It seemed like the one on the left was the higher reader, and the other one was kind of going off her cues with reading and everything.
Okay, I'm actually not sure which one's the lead reader and the struggling reader, but
Sounded
yeah.
like one, but you could tell one was higher and the other was kind of joining in with it.
It sounded like everybody in the classroom was reading, but it was still manageable.
Yeah.
Crazy thing to have everybody reading.
Yeah, and that's usually a question. That's usually a question that we get is, if everybody's reading out loud at the same time, won't it be too noisy? And what we have found when we've gone and observed this in classrooms is it's not, because you're so focused. Teachers do teach, then the PowerPoint that I'll show you that the teacher created, she taught them like best friend whisper voice. So we're not reading out loud so everyone can hear, so like when we're choral reading, but that loud enough so your pair can hear you. And then I also noticed when teachers allow the students to move wherever they wanted in the room and then stay there for the dyad reading, that the sound is more dispersed than them sitting in their desks. But again, that's a classroom management thing, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the data. But that was an observation that I made. Anything else that you noticed? Okay. So one of the things that's key to dyad reading is the complexity of the text, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But if you think about if you go to the gym and you lift weights, if you lift 5-pound weights every day, you're gonna get to the point that you can lift 5-pound weights for hours on end and not get tired. But the minute that you add 10-pound weights, you're not going to be able to lift them for very long because you haven't built the strength, you've just built the endurance. And so it's the same thing with complex text. If we keep students at their instructional level, when they get to something more challenging, they're not going to be able to endure through it, and they're not going to be able to comprehend, and they're not going to be as successful with it. And so dyad reading, because the pairings are very specific, it gives the struggling readers that scaffolding piece they need to be able to work in that more complex text, and we see greater gains because of that. So this is the definition of dyad reading. It's a cooperative peer-assisted reading. So we have two peers sitting side by side. They're reading in one book. They're reading out loud at the same time. Someone's tracking it. They're reading it out loud at the same time. And what's great about this is because they're in a challenging text, but this is a whole class strategy. So you're differentiating based on their needs in your Acadience reading data, but it's something that you do whole class. And it's only 15 minutes a day. And it works, and it's great. One of the reasons that it works is because it's multisensory. So we're hearing, seeing, saying the words at the same time, and that's what's helping to move the students forward as well as being in that challenging text. So dyad isn't something that's new. We have over 60 years worth of research. But it's mostly the research has been done with an adult and a child. And so what's different about the study that was done with BYU and USU a couple years ago in Davis County is that they wanted to see if it would work with peers. And the great news is it does. The parents just have to be strategic, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit about what that looks like. What I want you to do right now is this document that you received. The first couple pages is an article from one of the third grade teachers that was part of the study that BYU and USU did in Davis School District. And so I want you to take a few minutes and read through that And while you're reading through, it's just the first couple pages, not the whole packet. And in your own words, I want you to be thinking about what is Dyad, how can you use it with your students, and then be thinking about what other questions you have. We'll most likely answer them, especially if they're implementation questions as we go through this, but I want you to start thinking through those, because if we don't answer them, I want to be able to answer them. Okay, so go ahead and take a few minutes to read through her story.
Thank you.
About 2 more minutes, and then we're going to have you talking to people. All right, in your table groups, go ahead and start answering these questions as a table group. What is Dyad reading? How could you use it with your students? And what questions do you still have? We'll give you about 2.5 minutes to chat in your groups.
We're showing
Either on level or just below with the higher readers. It just depends on scheduling because this is something you want to do every day. So a lot of times buddy reading only happens like once a week, yeah.
But she had it.
About 1 more minute. Do you want me to pass for you? Come back with me in 5, 4, 3. Thank you. So hopefully you're getting a little excited, possibilities of doing this in your classroom. We're going to hold your questions for right now, and then as we go through, hopefully they get answered, but again, if they don't, please bring them up. What's going around right now is this one-page document, and what I like about this document is it really is kind of a one-pager that you can share with parents, share with other teachers, post it to help remind you, but it's a step-by-step on how to get started. And so, quickly to run through these, we're going to go more in depth in just a minute, but finding the challenge materials. How many of you have a library in your classroom? Guess what? You can use those books. So you're going to be able to use the books that you already have, and we'll talk about if you have students that are really high, like if you need other books, talk to your neighbors in other grade levels. Sharing is caring. So this isn't meant to be something that you have to go and buy a whole bunch of new books for. You've already assessed your students for beginning of the year, yay, so it means we can start pairing them. And we'll talk more about the pairings in just a minute. Setting up book bins, I'll show you a couple of examples. I went down to Washington County last year where we had several classrooms that were implementing it and letting us at the state kind of follow them and get feedback about their experience as we're sharing this across the state with what works and implementation. So I took pictures while I was in those classrooms. So I'll show you some different examples. Train your students, and then support students in implementation. So it is pretty simple. The teachers have implemented just like anything else. It takes a couple of weeks for students to really have the procedure down, but once it's down, they've got it. And it really does, it's about 15 minutes a day, and then they're done. So one of the things that's really important is making sure that students are in that challenging text. So I'll show you some data in just a minute from the study. Typically, we're gonna be talking in Lexiles, and typical gains in Lexile is 75 to 115 Lexile points in a year. And I'm going to, the teacher whose PowerPoint that I have that she's with her students, she was a 5th grade teacher, and we haven't looked at her data for this year, but the year before that, she made over 600 Lexile gains with her 5th grade students on average. We can really move kids with this 15 minutes a day strategy. We had one outlier teacher in Washington County who just made the typical gains. It was a 3rd grade classroom. So when we went to visit her last fall, we looked and she was implementing everything correctly as far as like procedurally. And so then we did some investigating and we noticed that the books weren't challenging enough for the students. And so the challenging text really does make that difference in the amount of gains that students can make. So the way that the pairs were made and strategically made is they look at their data, and what's great about, you guys use MClass, Amplify, right? It's even better than the Acadian's learning platform because theirs is a printable report. You can manipulate yours on your platform. So there's a button now that's up in the top right-hand corner that says Lexiles when you're in your homepage. So when you click that, all your students have a Lexile, and then you can already rank them from highest to lowest. So that work's already basically done for you, which is great. So then students are ranked high to low, and then the class is split in half. Now, again, this is in a perfect world. I know that nobody has odd number classrooms, right? Nobody's absent. And so typically the pairs are, you wouldn't want to pair them if you had a classroom of 30. You wouldn't want to pair one with 30 because the gap's going to potentially be too big between the readers. So you split it in half and you pair 1 with 15, 2 with 16. Sometimes then the gap is even too big. And so then what we do is you split your class in fourths and pair it that way. So it'd be like 1 with 8 and 2 with 9. And then like 15 with 20 is another way to potentially do it. It's not perfect, and you as a teacher will know, like if you come to a pair, and you're like, oh, those two cannot be paired together. It's okay for you to change those pairings. It's approximate, but it works. So let me show you an example. So in this example, we have our highest reader, Miguel, at the top, who's a 7th grade reader. This is a 3rd grade classroom. And then down at the bottom, we have Carl as our lowest reader, and he's reading at a 1st grade level. So if we paired Carl and Miguel together, even if we were reading books 2 or 3 grade levels above Carl's level, so if we were reading books that were 3rd or 4th grade books, it would bore Miguel, and he would speed read along and leave Carl in the dust. So the pairing just wouldn't be a great pairing. But if we split the class in half, and we've got Miguel paired with Tran, who's reading on a 3rd grade level, and we're reading books that are 2 or 3 grade levels above Tran's level, so we're looking at books that are in 5th or 6th grade, that's closer to Miguel's level, and it's something that he can still support Tran in because he should know most of those words. And then if you look here, Carl is now paired with Jason, who's reading at a 3rd grade level. So if you read books that are on a 3rd grade level, Jason can still support Carl with those readings. And again, we've got several students that read 3rd grade, so if Tran and Miguel are like arch enemies, we can pair Jason with Miguel and it'd still be okay. So even though in the line, what I'm saying is like, as the teacher, you know your students, and so don't feel confined to pairing 1 with 15 if 1 with 16 would be a better pairing. And typically these pairings, you would want to keep them the same until you have data that shows that they need to change. Because it takes a little bit to get used to each other and being able to read on that not too fast, not too slow pace. And so typically that's beginning and middle of year is when you would change your pairings. But if you have a pair that's just not working after a couple of weeks or a week and you're noticing like they're not reading well together, it's okay to change those pairs. We get asked a lot of times, what happens when we have an odd number group in our class? And so in that case, you would make a triad. And it depends on the makeup of your classroom, if you want to have 2 lead readers with a struggling reader, or if you want a lead reader with 2 struggling readers. And the way that would look is if you have 2 lead readers, they would be on the outside and your struggling reader would be on the inside, still one book. The student in the middle would be holding the book. And then if it's 2 struggling readers, you'd have your lead reader in the middle with the 2 struggling readers on either side. So again, it really just depends on the makeup of your classroom and what pairing would work best depending on the makeup of your classroom. If you have a student that's absent, the best thing that teachers have told us that they've done is that they have the student whose pair is missing go with another pair. They take a few seconds, and the pair that's there explains to the person joining them what's happened already in their book, and then they just continue to read Dyad like normal. And so kind of catching that person up, and then when that person's pair's back, they're reading the book that they were reading together. So in the study, they looked at one classroom read 2 grade levels above, 3 grade levels above, 4 grade levels above, and then the control group wasn't paired, they were silently reading. So they wanted to see where's that sweet spot of too much, because if you go to the gym, and if you're like me, you can't start out with 100-pound weights. So they wanted to see where that sweet spot was. So again, remember I said 75 to 115 is typical average gains. The study in Davis County was done for half of a school year, and these were their results.
So the combined Dyad groups is all the different, sorry.
Correct, yeah. So it's the groups that were reading 2, 3, and 4 grade levels above, and then the control group was the group that was silently reading. So you can see that the control group was kind of on average with typical gains. Yeah.
Does it mostly benefit the struggling reader, or are the higher readers also gaining this much?
Great question. So what we love to say about this study and what those that did the research study, no children were harmed in the making of this study. So the struggling readers do gain more, but the lead readers, and I'll show you a little graph in just a minute, the lead readers make more gains than your typical in an average year if they were just reading on their own. Yeah. So this graph is a little confusing to read, but what we've got is on the far left is your control group in each of the 4 columns, because on the bottom it's how many days over time. So if we look at this overall column, and we spend some time looking here, we've got the control group, the lead readers, the students that were reading 2 grade levels, 3 grade levels, and 4 grade levels above. And if you look up at the top where the bar is, that's where we're seeing the gains. So you can see if you go across, if they're lead readers, that 75 to 115 was typical average. Our lead readers are still making about 150, they made 150 lexile gains in that half of a year. So they're still making great gains. And then you can see up at with the struggling readers, 4 grade levels above, it starts to dip a little bit, but it's still significant gains. So that's why we say 2 or 3 grade levels above the struggling readers' lexile level. Because if they've got a book that if they really want to read Harry Potter and it's 3.5 grade levels above or 2.5 grade levels above what they're reading, it's okay to let them read it. So you have a little bit of flexibility with that choice if there's something that they really want to read. So these were the really important things that they learned, that reading out loud showed significant gains. The text difficulty was really important with making those gains, and that students that were reading 2 grade levels above the struggling readers level made the most growth. So this is a chart that just shows at grade level what the lexiles look like. So it's really important to distinguish between 2 grade levels above and 2 Lexile above. Because a lot of times we'll think, oh, they're reading at like 119, so I'll just go to 319. Well, that doesn't always work out, because if we did that, then they would only be 1 grade level above. So we use the Lexiles to know what grade level they're in, and then we go 2 grade levels above that, and then that shows us our range. So if that student that was reading 119 Lexile levels puts them in 1st grade, so we want to go at least 2 grade levels above that, so 3rd or 4th grade. So that puts us in a Lexile range of 500 to 799. So pretty significant, but it depends on what the lead reader's abilities are that's paired with them, as well as their that choice as far as what they're interested in reading. But it gives them a good enough range that we can find something that they want to read. Any questions on Lexile versus grade level and how we use them?
Can I take a picture of that?
Yeah, you can. You also have access to it in the Google Drive.
There you go. Okay.
So the materials, we've talked about this already a little bit, that you can use the books that you already have in your library. And I don't want you to think if you already have your library leveled in a way that's not Lexile, it's okay. I'm not telling you to go re-level your library. You may find that it's easier as you go on, but you don't have to go do that right now. And even if you don't have books right now that in all of your students' levels, when you're teaching them procedure the next couple weeks, that's okay. That gives you a little bit of time to find books in that student's Lexile level. And that's where you shoot out an email to your colleagues, or you work with the librarian and being able to gather those books if you don't have them on their Lexile level. There's a couple of tools that you can use. You can use Lexile.com to find the level of a Lexile book. And then Scholastic has an app called Scholastic Wizard that once you have that app downloaded, you just take a scan of the barcode on the back of the book, and it will pop up the Lexile level and all the other, like Fontes and Pinnell and AR and a few other. Scholastic Wizard. You're welcome. And so those are those are tools that you can utilize right now if your library isn't leveled by Lexile, because we don't want you to ever feel like that's a barrier to you getting started with doing this. And especially if you have older students, well, you can have them check the level of the Lexile as they're choosing the books. Another thing you can do, what curriculum do you, I can't remember.
Wonders.
Okay, so like the Wonders guided reading books, those have the Lexile level on the back. And so you can start using those as well too. You don't want to stay just in those, because part of the magic, I guess, of this strategy is struggling readers have never typically finished a book. And so we want to put them in real books in their eyes as quickly as possible. But you can definitely start with the guided reading books, the either on grade level or above grade level guided reading books, to just get the procedure going. So here's some pictures of what teachers used. So some had like the dollar store bins, but then we went to a classroom where the teacher was in a cubicle and didn't have a lot of, or a portable, and didn't have a lot of space. So it's like a cubicle. They're small. And so she didn't have a lot of space, and so she used gallon-sized baggies. And so you don't need to go out and buy a bunch of things. There's another school that is using the pocket charts that have some bigger pocket charts that can hold a couple of books. So they're going to put those up against the wall that hold their Dyad books, because they don't have a lot of space in the classroom either. So start thinking like, this doesn't have to take up a lot of time, doesn't have to take up a lot of space. Something else that most of the classrooms had was some sort of little notebook. And this one was really like those ones that come in like prize boxes sometimes that are like this big, for students to write down crazy or unknown words. So these are words that the lead reader and the struggling reader both don't know. So because the lead reader becomes that scaffolding piece for the struggling reader, they should know most of the words that the struggling reader doesn't know. But if they come to a word that they both don't know, then they write down that word and the page number and then keep reading. So then it becomes something that you as a teacher potentially could incorporate into vocabulary lessons or something right after, and teaching them how to break down that word if it's a multisyllabic word, or if it's a tier 3 word very specific to the book that they're reading. You can talk through some of those things at a later time. As far as the study actually went, the unknown words, crazy words were just a way as kind of a classroom management tool, and they didn't follow what the teachers did with it after the words. But most of them, I think it's the next, no, not quite yet. Most of them had a spot in on their whiteboard or chart board or chart paper for the students to write the words after the 15 minutes. So right now I want you to just think for a minute, when could you do this in your schedule? Where can you find that 15 minutes? Right when school starts, before, after a transition, like lunch or recess, the last 15 minutes of the day. When would be a good consistent time for you to do it? So take about 10 seconds to think through that in your mind, and then I want you to share with those at your table for the next 45 seconds. Ready, go. Potentially, it would depend on, it's easier to do it as a whole class because it's just 15 minutes versus trying to manage the changing of those groups for the whole time that you're doing pictures.
Oh, gotcha. I was gonna send it out here. Right. I gotta do, like, stuff like this, I gotta do it once. I can't do it in the afternoon because the afternoon is too fast.
15 more seconds.
Quick question.
They would. There's conversion charts. None of them are perfect. There's no true perfect conversion. There's one in the handouts, and then there's one on letsgo.com, and there's several conversion charts that you could.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And so their fluency maybe they're with someone. They're with.
Come back with me in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thumb in the air if you have at least a time you're going to try. Okay. Thumb in the air if you have a time of the day that you're going to at least attempt to try this. Okay, so it looks like most of you keep thinking, and if we need to troubleshoot sometimes, we can do that too a little bit later.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So is this like we want to do it every day? I mean, it's a 95 days. Are we looking at every single day of the week? Or just twice a week, 3 times a week?
So ideally 5 times a week. If ideally doesn't work, 4 times a week. So 4 to 5 times is what we recommend. And so the study was done for part of a year, and we've had teachers who told us they were really good about keeping true to that 15 minutes for the first half of the year, but then other things came up towards the end of the year and testing, and so students didn't show as much growth as they had hoped for between middle of year and end of year benchmarks with Acadian's reading. And so it is something that the more you do it, the better they're going to be. So, great question. Yeah.
Difference between 4 and 5.
So that's the recommendation. So if you can do it 5 times a week, then do it. If you can't, 4 is better than none, or the 3 or 2.
This is whole group, right?
Yes, this is a whole group time because it's only 15 minutes. And what's great about it, it is a differentiated time because you have the pairings and you have the Lexile books that they're reading during that time. But it's just a come in, 15 minutes, and then we move on. And what's great about it is it really does work in just 15 minutes. We've had people ask us, well, what about 20 minutes or 30 minutes? And there is some schools in Granite School District right now that the kids, they're following some students that are getting essentially a double dose. So they're getting 15 minutes in their classroom and 15 minutes after school. But we know that it works in just 15 minutes. And so we know that you have a million other things that you need to teach and accomplish in a day. And so you really can just stick to the 15 minutes and it'd be effective. So these are the rules, and you read through these. These are, I think, on the second page of the bigger handout. And what's great about these is they work for every grade level. They share one book. You select it carefully, so that means 2 or 3 grade levels above. You sit side by side, one smooth finger. This is something that you're going to have to model for students because most of us, especially as adults, we don't track with our finger anymore. And a lot of times we don't teach students how to track, so then they're tracking each word, and it really does need to be one smooth finger to help their eyes with that tracking. 2 voices. So again, we're going to practice what this looks like in just a minute, but it's something that they're not used to doing. Eyes on words, not too fast, not too slow. You'll want to model what that looks like. Write down crazy words, unknown words, you can call it whatever you want if you want to do that component of it, and have fun. So again, this is a really exciting time for students. We've had teachers tell us that have implemented it that if they have to skip something in their day because of an assembly or the power going out or any other myriad of things that disrupt school, Dyad's one thing that they don't miss. The students don't want to miss this time. If you think about whether you've been a struggling reader yourself, or we've had struggling readers in our classroom, if we've ever had them try to read on their own, it's a very isolating time for them. But now we've paired them with someone, so it becomes a social interaction, even though it's a controlled social interaction, and they enjoy it, and they're finally reading a book. And if you've had those students that are struggling so much that they're going, their brain's working so hard on just decoding that they're not able to comprehend what they're reading. By pairing them with someone who has that ability to read fluently, they're able to read and follow their lead reader, and so their brain doesn't have to work as hard at decoding, and so they're able to comprehend what they're reading, and they're excited about what they're reading. One of the classrooms that we went to, and this was in October of last year, had a chart on her wall, and they had students that they had the pairs listed, and then they were putting up stickers for every book that they read. And there was one pair that was so excited to show us that they had already finished 4 books in October. And they were so highly motivated, and this becomes that time of the day that everybody looks forward to. And so it is something that it works, and it's fast, easy, simple. Once you put in the work with your pairs and teach the procedure to them, it works like clockwork. So again, this is just some ideas on what to do with some of those unknown words. So you can model the decoding, looking at the roots and the affixes, whatever your standards are with some of those grammar components, and discussing the meaning. The one thing that teachers have said is making sure that they put down the page number because context matters. And so that helps them to know what meaning of the word in context of the story that they're reading. So then what the teacher does, so the teacher that had over 600 Lexile gains last year, 5th grade classroom, when we were visiting her classroom, she said once it's up and running, she's like, I could go to Wendy's in this 15 minutes, the kids would have no idea. We are not advocating you go to Wendy's during this time. But
It's too far.
don't go to Wendy's during this time, but it works so well. The students are so highly
It takes
engaged.
17 minutes to get to Wendy's. Not that I know.
I was like, I know.
That's great. So you can go. It takes longer to get to Wendy's than the 15 minutes. But it is such a highly engaging time for the students that the teacher almost can disappear. We're not advocating for that. But what we're saying, this is what the teacher does do when the students are in their dyad pairs. Is that they're listening to the students read, they're monitoring the practice, especially the first couple weeks as you're teaching them the procedure. You're going to have to help them, especially your lead readers, because the only time that they've most likely read out loud is either when you're choral reading as a whole class, so then our prosody and our rate goes way down because we're reading as a whole class, or when they're doing some sort of a cadence reading, benchmark progress monitoring, and they feel like they need to read as fast as they can. And so this reading out loud for enjoyment is something that's not something that we've ever really done before. And so it is something that you'll have to monitor and help them practice and teach them how to do. Listen to the student discussions. So one thing that we get asked all the time is it just straight 15 minutes of reading? And as close to that as possible, yes. So if students come to a part that's funny and they laugh, they can talk about why that was funny. Or if they read a sentence and one of the readers like, oh, I'm not sure what that means. Can we read that again? That's okay. They can stop and reread that again. Or they can discuss, whoa, why did the character do that? Those kind of natural conversations that we think in our own minds as we're reading, and things that come up like that, it's totally fine for them to stop and do in that natural sense. We don't want those conversations, though, to take more than 3 of the 15 minutes. So if you've got a chatty group, you're going to want to help them along. So that's one of the things when you're, as far as what that means by listening to student discussions. If you have time to add either, if you have with Wonders, they usually have like a big idea question of the week. If you want to have them discuss that at the end of their 15 minutes, you can add that. But again, that's something potentially after that 15 minutes. So you want it to be as close to actually reading out loud for 15 minutes as possible, because it's building that endurance and that strength piece, as well as being able to just read for 15 minutes and comprehending that as they go. But discussion's okay. So again, we've kind of talked about this already, but it's great for everyone. 15 minutes a day. It's a whole class intervention, which is great because there's one of us and 30 of them, and this gives us that time to really differentiate with one adult in the classroom. It has been effective with English language learners as well as low-income students, so it really does work for everyone. If you have an English language learner who is brand new to the country, who doesn't know English, what we suggest is we put them in a triad, and then you encourage them to read as many words as they can when they know the words, and then they will eventually be reading more words because they know the words. So these are some of the pictures from the classrooms that I went and visited. So again, this is the poster that I was talking about where the students, they'd already read 4 books and they were really excited about reading them. The teacher that had over 600 Lexile gains, this is just Erica's ism. I feel like she took this procedural, the research-based practice of Dyad and infused it with the love of reading, and that's one of the reasons why she had such high gains. So in her classroom, they had these bookworms, and so when a pair finished a book, they wrote the title of the book on the bookworm, They gave it a rating of 1 to 5 stars and a sentence why they gave it that rating. And then at the end of the 15 minutes, they put that bookworm in a specific spot, so she looked for bookworms. And then she read through those reviews of the books, and then she posted them in a spot in her room, so the class could see as a whole group how many books that they had read, and then it became a book review for other students who wanted to read that book later. So it was just one of those strategies that seemed to infuse that love of reading with the science of reading. Everyone had a timer going. Again, it only needs to be 15 minutes, so we're not asking you to take more than that. So everyone had a timer of some sort going on in their classroom. Everyone had a list of the pairs somewhere. And none of them called them lead reader, struggling reader. It was usually the reader on top of the list or the reader on bottom. If it was the teacher with the gallon-sized baggies, the leader on top listed first had these responsibilities. The reader on the bottom had these responsibilities, like getting the book out, tracking the words, writing the unknown words down, some of those kind of job type things. Everyone had a spot in their classroom. Yeah.
Just, and if you were going to get to this, just tell me to hold off, but does it matter who tracks which of the two?
Great question. So in the study, they had the lead reader track. Teachers who are implementing it say sometimes you need the struggling reader to track to help them pay attention to the book. Most teachers say what works best is to have the student that's sitting on the left track the left page and the student on the right track the right page, so then they're both doing it. Great question. And then most of the classrooms that we went to did have their books leveled by Lexile. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So after we benchmark again in the middle of the year,
Yeah.
would this be a time to change them, or do they stay with their buddy through thick and thin?
Great question. So that is the time that you would want to change if change needs to happen.
Right.
So if there is, if you've got a pair before them though that needs changed, that they're just not clicking, they're not working together, change them. Like, we want this to be an enjoyable time for them, and you know as the teacher, your student's best. But the time that you would typically make a bigger change would be after your middle of year data.
Okay.
Great question. So now let's take some time to actually practice this. So you've all been given a Read Naturally passage. So you only need one copy of it between you and one other person. What we're going to do is the person with the longest hair is going to be the lead reader first. And all that means is they're going to track the words first in this setting. When I say switch, then the person with the shorter hair becomes the lead reader and they track the words. But you're going to continue to read the passage. Right?
Except you're taking your head back like this.
Okay. Any questions on what we're going to do right now? So you have 2 or 3 different passages, so I'm giving you some choice. You don't have to just read the first one. So we're going to read for about a minute. And so again, the lead reader is the one with the longest hair right now, so they're tracking the words first. When I say switch, then the person with the shorter hair becomes the lead reader and they track the words. But we're both reading out loud at the same time. Ready? Go. you to do right now is in your table groups, just kind of process that experience. What was new? What did you feel? And start thinking through some of those things that you may need to articulate to your students as you're teaching them this process. So just take a couple minutes to process it with your table groups. Keep going through it. If you want to stop, then you can stop because you're not comprehending. That's okay. They can if they need to. So it's a natural discussion point. It's not, okay, we get to this page and we have to stop and talk about what we just read. So if they come to a spot where they want to discuss, then they discuss. So if they're reading too fast, that's what we talk about that, not too fast, not too slow.
What?
So yeah, you're going to slow down a little bit more.
There's a pathway to progress when we go
So if they are reading too fast, if you have the struggling reader be the only track, then the lead reader knows to follow their finger. And so then it slows them down a little bit too. And then if they're still struggling, then rereading, it's not that. Like the rereads will know that helps and that works. We don't want them to get so bogged down in rereading that they never finish a book. Welcome.
You two talk.
About 30 more seconds and we'll come back together as a group.
Okay. She said if you can find a several, you guys talk and decide what you want to do.
Come back with me in 5.
Sorry, Jamie.
4.
I'm going, no, you're going to the math one. She's going to the academy.
3.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep it all straight.
2. 1. Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to share that experience or things that as you were discussing that came up, either ahas or questions that you still have? Yeah.
We noticed, like, as we were reading, that there was a part where we went, wait, what, is that really true? Like, we actually had to discuss it a little bit, but that's good.
Yeah, those natural times that you want to discuss are okay, as long as we're keeping it to like 2 or 3 minutes out of the 15.
Well, I thought that was something to bring up with your students, just say, you know, you're gonna have your inner voice listening, and sometimes it wants to talk out, and because mine always does. And so I just thought we shared it, and then we continued on through it.
Yeah, great.
So we were just wondering, they have to finish a book before they start another one?
That's typically, so the way that teachers have told us in the past is they give their kids like a kind of like get out of jail free, like a pass for a book. If there's something that they're neither one, once they get into it, they're just not interested in reading it, go ahead and put it away, or, you know, swap it out. Otherwise, yeah, they're reading for 15 minutes a day until they finish that book.
I can see we were talking about how important it is to have the one text because you've got all the other noise going on around you. But if you're one text and you are like close, not just sitting by each other, but you're close to be reading the same text, like I was able to hear her above every, like all the other noise. And so I can see how maybe that wouldn't be as effective if they were reading from the same book, but 2 different
Yeah, that's a great observation. Observation just left my mind. Yeah.
How do you, because I just worry about my struggling readers, how do you prevent them from feeling like overwhelmed or frustrated because they maybe can't read as fast? Like,
Yeah. So the way that works is really being explicit with your students on what that not too fast, not too slow pace looks like. So when you think, we don't want to go too slow where neither one of the pairs not comprehending. A lot of times when we do whole class choral reading is a good strategy, but a lot of times we slow things down so slow that we're not getting through as much, and comprehension can be lost. And so it's finding that sweet spot of the lead reader not leaving the struggling reader behind in that comprehension piece, and as well as not going too slow where the lead reader becomes bored and the struggling reader is still just struggling. Okay. And that's one of the purposes behind the pairings, is you're choosing material that will be interesting to both, as well as the pairings should be close to the lead reader's readability level, so it keeps them interested, as well as but some of your pairings you'll have to really be explicit and teach them what that not too fast, not too slow pace looks like. And the longer that they do it together, which is one of the reasons why you want to keep the pairs as consistent as possible, is they get used to each other. So like I have a 2nd grade daughter, and she and I will do this at home, and when we come to a new multisyllabic word, she's about a half a second behind me. And then if we come to like a phrase list of phrase words that she knows, sight words that she knows really well, she'll like speed up like a half a second ahead of me because she's so confident in those words. And that's okay, because it's keeping a pretty even pace. And then for me, when we come to those multisyllabic words where she is that half a second behind me, I know to stop and be like, oh, I don't think do you know what this word means? And if she doesn't, then we talk about what it means and we read that sentence again. And so those are some of those things that, depending on your pairs, depending on the grade level that you teach and the maturity level of your students, they may be able to have some of those conversations. It'll just depend on the culture and how you bring this to your students and how you present it to them. Great question. Any other thoughts with this experience?
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, when we were reading, I was not comprehending any of it. I was so worried about making sure I said the words right and I could hear that. I mean, I know it was about helium. That was about it. It's probably not about helium. I have no idea. Anyway. I did not comprehend anything, apparently.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that's one of the things that, as you're teaching your students, it's okay to reread again. We don't want to get to the point where we're rereading it over and over to the point where we're not getting through the book. But it's okay to reread. It's okay to tell me I didn't understand what that sentence was. Can we reread that? And they will get to the point where they're comfortable with each other enough that those worries of being able to read the words and that keeping up, those will dissipate, and they'll be able to comprehend.
I was just thinking when we were talking about, because there was obviously a word in here that maybe we don't always agree on how we say it or whatever. And I have kids, so I could see having an argument about that and having the rule be, okay, we're writing in our notepad. We're not gonna even worry about it. We're just gonna write down our notepad and move on with the reading, so that we're not stopping and having a discussion on who's correct. So that would be something I'd probably put in my, this is how we do this, and if we have a word issue, we're writing it in the notepad and that's it. And then we move on so that we can get through more of our story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thought as far as pronunciation. So it's used for if they don't know the meaning. But yeah, if you're going to have students that you know already that may have a disagreement about the pronunciation, that's a great way to use it too. Okay, so this is one of my favorite quotes, kind of going along the lines with Dyad. Is what a child can do in cooperation today, he can do alone tomorrow. Therefore, the only good kind of instruction is that which marches ahead of development and leads it. And this is really what we're doing in Dyad, because by the end of the year, you're going to have better readers, and you're going to have students that will be able to read more alone before they were at the beginning of the year. And it's super exciting. So we're going to, in just a minute, I'm going to show you quickly the PowerPoint that the teacher used with her students, just to give you ideas so you don't have to start from scratch. And you have access to this PowerPoint in the Google folder. And we're going to start working on making your pairs. Before I get there, this is in the Google folder, but we have a Dyad course on Canvas. We're moving from UEN Canvas to USBE Canvas. So I would say enroll today or tomorrow into this course on UEN. You'll get 7 relicensure points by enrolling. Everybody needs relicensure points. And it's someone else besides me built the course, so it's similar, it's the same materials but presented in a little different way, so if you want a refresher. And then once we have the code for the USBE version, I'll update this in the slides in the Google folder. So when all of the UEN USBE Run Canvas courses are moving to the USBE platform, and so you'll need to register on the USBE platform, and then you'll be able to enroll in this course. So while it's open right now, enroll. And then it has already moved over to USBE. It's just a matter of us opening it and making sure everything rolled over correctly. And that's my email. Anybody, you're all welcome to email me if you have questions as you're implementing this. Happy to troubleshoot with you. And let me show you the other PowerPoint.
Erica, I finished that one that was online, the Dyad reading online. It only takes about maybe an hour.
Yeah, you get 7 relicensure points.
For an hour of your time. The online Dyad reading course.
Yeah. Okay, so this PowerPoint, I'm going to just zip through it so we can get to actually building your pairs before our time's up today. So this is the PowerPoint again that the 5th grade teacher put together to actually share this procedure with her students. So down in Washington County, they have camps, which is why it's off to the side. That's a positive behavior system that they use down there. So for her Dyad reading, she talked about 2 best friend whisper. So she explained what that looks like and sounds like. If you don't know a word, you ask your partner. It's 15 minutes. You stay where you start. Sit, eek. We'll talk about what that means in the next slide. Read the whole time. Successful students will focus on reading, be a good partner, read fluently, read together. So she's setting up those expectations of what it's going to look like in the classroom. And then she breaks down each of the rules. So share one book, sit side by side, eek, and eek is elbow to elbow, knee to knee, the book in the middle so we both can see. Super cute. Elementary teacher definitely made that up. But she goes through what it looks like and what it sounds like. And so she has that picture there of what it looks like, but she also had students model what it looked like, and then she also had them model what it sounds like, and that's her whisper best friend to whisper voice. Because it did get a little bit loud, and if you teach them what that whisper should sound like, and if only me and my partner should be able to hear each other, it gets better. Track the word with one finger, pointer, or card. So one teacher had witch fingers out for them to point during this time. Some had cards and rulers. That depends on your classroom management style and how much of that you want to introduce that could potentially be a distraction. So pointer finger works great, but it's something that you're going to have to model one smooth finger versus tracking each word. And again, what does it look like to read out loud together? So this is where you've already been in school for a little bit, so if you have a student in your classroom and you're thinking about that would be comfortable modeling all of this with you if you were their partner, that's just something to think about. Keep eyes on the words at all times. We don't read too fast or too slow. So again, she's explicitly teaching them, what does this look like? What does it sound like? To help, we're not speed reading. This is not This is not a progress monitoring or a benchmark assessment. We are reading for enjoyment, but we're reading out loud. We read the entire time, and so we talk about that. What that means is that's that 15 minutes. Again, and it kind of depends. When they're learning the procedure, you may tell them read the whole time, and then once they've got the procedure down, then it's okay to, then you may be like, it's okay for you to discuss that, or building in that discussion piece after they have the procedure down. Write down any unknown words in your journal, and then on the board after the 15 minutes. Be excited to finish a book and have fun. So then she had them list it all out again. Then she talks about what she's going to do in the room. So she sets up her expectations for them in the procedure. Then she talks about what they can expect of her during that time. These were her rules for exchanging the books. So again, this wasn't part of the study, and it really is a classroom management piece. So a lot of times teachers will give the students 2 or 3 books in their bags or their bins, and as they finish one, they just go on to the next one, and they kind of exchange in a rotation. She had them exchange on Thursdays. They kept reading, and then she would call students back, or group pairs back to exchange books. Some have given them kind of that get out of jail free card. If they really aren't liking a book, they can exchange it once, and that's it. Some classroom teachers just said, this is the book you're reading. They still made games. There were others that said, choose between any of the books on this shelf. So really, as long as it's the 2 to 3 grade levels above students' Lexile level, how that book comes to their hands, whether you're choosing it, they're choosing it, really is your management style and how you want to manage that. Then she talks about why we're doing this. That we're going to become better readers. We're going to actually finish books, and it's going to be a really exciting time in our classroom. And it's going to be fun, and that reminder that everyone does everything. So everyone's reading out loud at the same time. We're tracking the words. We're doing it together. And that was the end of her PowerPoint. So pretty simple. Again, you have access to this PowerPoint, so you can download it, make it your own. But it's a place to kind of start. Any questions at this point about Dyad reading, the process implementation?
I just want to know from you, I've heard different answers, but one thing I heard is that mid-second grade is when they should start Dyad reading. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
So great question. The research shows 2nd grade, so beginning of 2nd grade and up.
So they could start it now?
They could start it now. Kindergarten and 1st grade, because they're still learning those foundational basic skills, we want to make sure that they have those foundational skills. But if you have readers that are reading in kindergarten and 1st grade, it's okay to try this with them. What we recommend is staying with grade level material if you're going to practice it. So if you're going to try this, typically it's usually like January-ish in kindergarten, 1st grade, where you have more readers that you could try it with. But again, it's grade level. If you're in kindergarten, you're using kindergarten text. And if you're in 1st grade, you're using 1st grade text. So great question. Any other questions?
You said that they jumped how many points again? The study, 600?
So that was the classroom in Washington County for the 5th grade teacher. They jumped, their average was 600 Lexile gains in the whole school year. In the study, where it was half of the school year, it was over 200 Lexile gains in half of a year average for the 3rd grade classroom. And that was combined 2, 3, and 4 grade levels above the book. So if they took out that 4 grade levels above, it would have been higher.
So we'd hope for a minimum of 200.
At least, yeah. Okay, so what we're gonna do right now is we have a little over 30 minutes, so we can at least start your pairs. So you're going to get into Amplify now, and on your home page, you're going to click the Lexile button, and you can sort your students right there. And then you can start making your pairings. Start first by just splitting the class in half and seeing what that looks like, and then if the pairings are too far apart, then you could potentially split your class in 4ths. And I'll just be around, so if you have questions about your pairings, or if you have other questions that you're thinking about, then we'll go from there. So hopefully, hopefully by the time 3:30 comes around, you'll have your pairs ready to go for Monday.
You're like, how fun is this? Yes. Yes, this whole time. And Bliss. At WSD.net.
All my teeth.
So good to see you. I didn't even get to introduce you. How are things in second grade? Here's the thing. This is what I got. This is what I got. So now, because you're doing everyone here, extremely well.
I know, she talked to Ryan at the beginning here.
They're gonna miss that.
No, I can't. It is really that for like time.
Because you got some of my kids,
Bryce's teacher in fourth grade. So you know, she knows that they're not going to try and I know each other. And she goes,
no, we really had to stop. It's happening.
So you would take 12.
But I'm sitting on the hours. The aids, but our aids times are
Now, and you said, this is dry.